As we get closer to the fantasy playoffs, you want to go in on the right note, or maybe you still need to clinch that spot. Make the right decisions at quarterback and tight end. We're going to go through each matchup in week 14, tell you who we like and who we don't for fantasy. This is the last of the bye weeks. We got the Commanders and the Cardinals, the only teams that are off. There are several quarterbacks that you can start without even having to think about it. These are the must starts: Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, Tua Tagovailoa, and Pat Mahomes. And at tight end, still a couple of guys you don't have to think about: Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson, George Kittle, and Sam Laporta. We're going to kick it off with a Thursday night matchup, but first, let me remind you that if you haven't tried Underdog Fantasy yet, it's the perfect time to do that. If you sign up right now as a new customer and use promo code ENDGAME, you get a deposit match of 100% on every dollar you put in, up to a $100 limit. And you can take advantage of the new customer pick'em special. That's this Thursday night. Najee Harris just getting a yard. If he goes higher than 0.5 total yards and you took that pick, you're going to win that pick, and you just need to combine it with one other pick that you like. And we're about to tell you some of our favorite picks. So check it out now. Use promo code ENDGAME and try Underdog. So the first game of the week is the Patriots at the Steelers. That means we have the pleasure of seeing Bailey Zappi, probably, versus Mitch Trubisky. Let's start with Zappi. For fantasy purposes, what do we think of him?
Unstartable. That's what I think of him. I mean, I can't even think of a situation where I would start him. No chance.
Gonna have to agree. Don't think I want Bailey Zappi on any of my fantasy rosters. And Mitch Trubisky, it's probably the same.
Yeah, I mean, at least Mitch Trubisky can throw a little bit, maybe scramble a little bit, although he doesn't do that much these days. But, I mean, let's be real. I don't want to start Mitch Trubisky.
It would have to be a 2-quarterback league. And even then, and only if you're really hard up for another quarterback. And what does this mean for Pat Freiermuth? Mitch Trubisky help, hurt, or neither?
I think it probably hurts. I mean, you can't feel good about Freiermuth. Didn't do a whole lot last week after that big game against the Cardinals. I mean, look, it's rough on the tight end street, so I guess he's still borderline okay.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. He is startable, but you can't feel much of a ceiling. And the Patriots defense is at least pretty tough, so I prefer not to start Freiermuth unless I really have nothing better out there. Then we got the Bucs at the Falcons. Baker Mayfield on the road at Atlanta. Is he streamable?
Nah, I'm done with Baker Mayfield. I mean, this guy's been bad for like 3 straight weeks in fantasy. A 75-yard touchdown to Evans and still did nothing. Done. I mean, 2 QB super flex, but that's it.
Does seem like he's cooling off a bit. It also looks like the Bucs are pretty much out of playoff contention if they ever really were in it. So super flex only. And then at tight end, Cade Otton keeps saying that he might be an option, and I keep feeling like he doesn't do anything to really justify that.
Exactly. I mean, you're desperate, okay, but really I'd prefer not to.
Yeah, you know what? There's got to be somebody else out there who can at least get a touchdown, so let's just pass on Otton. Now Desmond Ridder, still holding down the starting job there. Had a tough matchup against the Jets last week. This is a more favorable defense in Tampa Bay, but how good can you feel about him?
Can't feel great, but he is at home. It is a good matchup. I definitely do not want to start him in a 1 QB league, but I think he's startable in a 2 QB superflex.
Agree. In superflex because he will run it, especially near the goal line. You know, he's got a lot of skill players around him who can do the job for him and maybe take it to the house. But I will say this, even though in superflex he's not the worst option, if you do look at the pick'ems on Underdog, as we do, look, I'm going to look at his early line right now, and it's 215.5 passing yards. I'm taking the lower because even if he could put up a few fancy points by running or maybe getting a touchdown, he's not putting up yardage. And in fact, since taking back the starting job from Taylor Heineke, he's not even reaching 200 yards. The last time he went over this number was week 7. If you're new to Underdog and you're looking for a good pick, of course you take the Najee Harris higher than 1 yard, but you combine it with the Ritter, I'm going lower, and that's a good way to combine these picks for week 14. And then Atlanta still has Kyle Pitts, although you may not know it from the box score. Is Pitts startable?
I mean, he wasn't bad last week. 8 targets. I caught some passes. Is he startable? I mean, I'd probably prefer him to Cade Otton, but prefer not to.
It's just, where's the touchdown upside? Where's the big game that we really want? Maybe it'll happen one day for Pitts, but again, only if you really have nothing else out there. Rams going to take on the Ravens. Look, Matt Stafford has looked really good the last couple of weeks, but now a road contest against Baltimore. How do you feel?
I mean, last week I felt terrible and he was great, so I don't feel much better this week on the road against Baltimore. At least last week was at home, but still, I think even in a 1 QB league, the way he's been playing, I think you got to at least consider him a decent starting option.
Yeah, Stafford liked this whole Rams offense very up and down, a little schizophrenic to be honest, but they got all their skill players back and supposedly healthy. When everyone's on the field, he seems to be good. The O-line is doing his job, so not my favorite because of the matchup, but I think he is streamable in a 1 QB league if you need somebody. And then Tyler Higbee predictably didn't score 2 touchdowns again, but also left the game with an injury. So if he plays in week 14, is he streamable?
No, I mean, had that random 2 touchdown game a couple weeks ago. You missed it. Oh well, don't start him.
Yeah, he's really not been startable pretty much all year, even before Cooper Kupp came back, so I'm going to ignore Higbee. And we know Baltimore, still without Mark Andrews rest of this season. Is Isaiah Likely somebody that you like?
Yeah, I think you have to this week. It's a good matchup against the Rams. They're not very good against tight ends. I know Njoku didn't have a big game last week, but Harrison Bryant did. He got, 4 catches in that game before the bye. I think Isaiah Likely this week, you're looking for a streamer. He's one of the better options.
I'll agree with that. I mean, he's not a guy I feel has a huge ceiling, but they're probably going to find ways to get him involved. So I think if you're looking for a replacement, especially for Andrews still, just go with Likely. Lions taking on the Bears, part 2 this season. Let's start with Jared Goff, now going to Soldier Field. How's he do?
I mean, I don't know. It hasn't been great for Jared Goff lately, right? Hasn't been putting up those big games on the road against the Bears. It's not a tough matchup, so not my favorite quarterback in a 1 QB league, but I think he's still startable in a 1 QB league.
Yeah, he always feels startable because, he will get touchdowns. They will pass the ball enough. This offense has been efficient, but you got to be a little concerned. I don't know that this is going to be a high-scoring game like the last one, to be honest. So he's streamable, but I don't love him. Now, what about Justin Fields? Had himself a decent game the last time they met. He's been running a lot lately. Is he a guy that you want in your lineup?
I think you have to put him in your lineup. 30 carries the last 2 games, but didn't he have 100 yards rushing the last time these teams met? Detroit's secondary has not been good. They've not been good against the pass. He's at home. I think Justin Fields a very good start this week.
Fields is one of the more divisive players in the NFL, and that includes in the fantasy community. He has the kind of upside that you always want. I almost don't care the matchup. If I have Fields, unless I happen to have one of those other stud quarterbacks, I'm going to start him. Now, Cole Kmet, it's not that simple. Again, very up or down. How do you feel about him this week?
Yeah, very up and down, but this is a good matchup against the Lions. They're not very good against tight ends. Again, I mean, I'm not going to say Cole Kmet's a guy you have to start, but if you're looking for a streaming option, he's a good one.
Hard to predict, but I will say this might be a good spot for him. I do like him among all the tight end streaming possibilities. He's probably going to be one of my favorite targets. The Colts are going to take on the Bengals. Let's start with Gardner Minshew. Minshew Mania is back after leading the team to win. It was against Tennessee last week. How do you feel about Minshew this week?
You can't feel as good on the road against the Bengals. Not a guy I want to start in a 1 QB league, but he's okay in a 2 QB superflex.
Yeah, I really don't feel like Minshew has ever moved this entire season for me as far as where I put him. He's always kind of like the high end of the QB2 range. Actually, maybe more like the mid QB2 range. So superflex, sure. Single QB, no. And now we got to talk Jake Browning. I was just ready to dismiss this, but after looking at the stats Monday night, 300-yard game, ran for a touchdown. Do we have to consider Browning a little more carefully now?
I think we do. He's at home. This is a good matchup against the Colts. That being said, I really would not want to start him in a 1 QB league, but I think in a 2 QB Superflex league, you can give him a look.
Yeah, going 1 QB and just putting Browning in your lineup feels way too ambitious. Like, there's only 2 teams I'll buy. You really shouldn't need a replacement quarterback, and it shouldn't have to be Jake Browning. But in a Superflex league, now he does have at least some interesting upside. The Jaguars going to Cleveland to take on the Browns. Like I was going to say, this might be a tough spot for Trevor Lawrence, but now we have to say we may not see Trevor Lawrence this week or even for multiple weeks. Before we diagnose anything, let's just say this. If Trevor Lawrence is cleared and manages to play in week 14, can you trust him here?
Yeah, it would be hard to trust him. You got to think not going to be as mobile on the road against this Browns defense. I would not feel nearly as good about him. 2 QB Superflex, sure, but I don't think I'd want to start him in a 1 QB league this week.
Yeah, like I was worried about him anyways, and now I'm limping off the field. Not a good thing. If he plays, you got to figure they're going to limit what he's doing out there. Quick passes. Look, Christian Kirk also got banged up in this game. Superflex, yeah, just because, there's not many quarterbacks I would put over him. But we have to be prepared for C.J. Beathard as the possible starting quarterback for Jacksonville. If it's Beathard, how do you feel about him?
You can't feel great. He came in, he did all right, but, how good can you feel about him on the road against the Browns? I don't even think I could do it in 2 QB Superflex.
Well, again, terrible matchup. I'll say out of all the backup quarterbacks out there, I feel decent about Beathard because he's capable. He's had some big games in the past. He's got some good weapons, although one of them might be missing. So Superflex, sure, but that's it. And then what does this mean for Evan Engram? Did go off, had a nice game, finally hit pay dirt, but could have a backup quarterback. And again, the matchup.
Yeah, not nearly as good of a matchup, but I still think with Trevor Lawrence, with Beathard, doesmes matter. Evan Engram, one of these tight ends, you pretty much put him in your lineup, you take what you get.
Well, that's the thing. He gets targeted. It had been, I think, 5 at least in every game this season. And so, maybe he doesn't score this week, but you pretty much have a stable floor, and there's not a lot of tight ends out there who are as consistent as him. Now on the Cleveland side, will it be Joe Flacco again? He actually didn't look too bad last week.
Yeah, it didn't look too bad. Jacksonville is a bit of a pass funnel, although we did see the Bengals run pretty well against them as well. At home, I wouldn't want to start Joe Flacco in a 1 QB league, but I think he's got enough upside for a 2 QB Superflex league this week.
Yeah, like if you're considering starting Joe Flacco in a traditional 1 QB league, you've been waiting too long to stash quarterbacks, or everyone else is stashing way too many quarterbacks. Look, I don't mind him this week. I'll be honest. He will throw the ball down the field. He'll throw it a lot. The Browns are still throwing it for some reason, way more than they should be. So he's interesting, but again, it should only be in a Superflex or 2 QB league. And then there's David Njoku. You mentioned him earlier. Still getting targeted. What is his upside here?
Yeah, you can't like him as much with Joe Flacco as you did with Dorian Thompson-Robinson when he was getting, double-digit targets. But he's still got 6 targets. It's another good matchup for him here against Jacksonville. I don't love him this week, but I think he's still startable.
Agree. Startable. Can't feel great. He's yet to really smash at all this season. I'm not sure if he ever will in this offense, but at least he'll get you a few points. Got the Panthers taking on the Saints in New Orleans. Bryce Young still kind of looked like the same Bryce Young without Frank Reich. Does he look any different this week?
Probably not. There's no upside here. You can't start Bryce Young.
Nah. In fact, I think you might even take a step back in this matchup. Not going to even look at Bryce Young. Now for New Orleans, Derek Carr out again with multiple injuries after taking another just crushing hit. If he does manage to play again and play through the pain, do you start him?
Again, not starting him in a 1 QB league. There's just no upside here. Barely throws for any touchdowns. Panthers, they're not a tough defense, but they play so slow. So in a 2 QB Superflex, sure, but that's it.
Yeah, like you said, it's maybe not even the injuries that are the question here. It's just what is his fantasy upside? So Superflex only. If it's Jameis Winston instead, we know the ceiling is higher, but the floor is much lower.
Yeah, exactly. A lot more risk here. Not doing it in a 1 QB league. You want to risk it in a 2 QB Superflex? Fine.
Risk is the critical word here. Is Jameis Winston. You already know. I don't think they're going to let him air it out. And they're not going to need to throw it, 40 plus times against Carolina. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to be actually that interesting this week. The Taysom Hill is always interesting, but is he going to be good this week?
I mean, why not? You think they're probably going to use him. Derek Carr banged up. If it's Jameis Winston, they'll probably have him out there running more plays, maybe throwing the ball. I mean, look, as far as tight end options go, I think Taysom Hill is pretty good.
There's several tight ends we've already talked about that I would start Taysom Hill over. So, again, as far as streamers, he's definitely a guy who can score a touchdown. He runs the ball. He was a leading rusher for the Saints last week. I think they're still going to get him involved. So, yeah, I got to like him again. Texans going to take on the Jets. Look, just when you think CJ Stroud is a must start, now he's going on the road to face its Jets defense and without Tank Dell. Is this enough to make you think that you should bench Stroud?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I mean, he didn't have a big game last week, and now on the road against the Jets, missing one of his key weapons, barely startable for me this week.
Yeah, this really comes down to who else you got, because there's plenty of quarterbacks I wouldn't put over Stroud, but at the same time, if you do have somebody comparable, you might want to pick him. At tight end, Dalton Schultz did not play week 13 with a hamstring injury. If he makes his way back, can you trust him?
Yeah, you got to feel pretty good about him. He's been mostly great this year. The Jets aren't good against tight ends. No Tank Dell might mean more targets. So I think if Schultz plays, he's a guy you start and you just take whatever you get.
Agree. You got to worry about a lot of these Texans in this matchup, but Schultz is probably not one of them. So assuming he's full go, he's still a strong, maybe even a top 10 tight end this week. If Schultz doesn't play, it's going to be Brevin Jordan again. Did he show you enough last week that you can consider him this week?
Yeah, I mean, he had a decent game, right? He wasn't terrible. Again, Tank Dell out could mean more targets. Jets kind of funneled the tight ends because they're so good against wide receivers, so he's startable.
Agree. Interesting upside. I wouldn't put him as high as Schultz. I mean, if Schultz plays, you can't even think about Brevin Jordan, but he's definitely somebody you can consider. On the other side of the ball, is there any Jet at quarterback that would make you even look twice in fantasy?
I mean, maybe if Tom Brady came out of retirement this week, I might have to think about it, but other than that, no.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend any time thinking about who it might be because it doesn't matter. And if it doesn't matter, if we don't care who the quarterback is, do we care about Ty Conklin?
I will say, he's kind of getting involved. I don't know if that's because it was Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian, but he had some okay games with Zach Wilson as well. But, I mean, how good can you really feel? Like, deep streaming option only.
I'm just going to say what I've been saying at every position. I feel okay leaving this Jets offense alone completely. Vikings at the Raiders. It might be Josh Dobbs again, but, man, after the way he looked before their bye week, I don't even know if we should be interested.
Yeah, I mean, it is a good matchup. They are on the road, but yeah, the way Kevin O'Connell's talking, I don't know. But I'll say if he does commit to Josh Dobbs against the Raiders, he's at least playable in a 2 QB Superflex.
He is playable because he runs. He'll run near the goal line. Justin Jefferson is back, probably, but still, only Superflex. Are you going to go there with Aiden O'Connell, the rookie, also coming off a bye?
Nah, I mean, what is the upside here, really? Like, you're just hoping for one touchdown. Like, please just give me one touchdown and maybe 250 yards. Even in a good matchup, I'm going to sit him.
I mean, he did look better from a real-life standpoint the last time when they played, but look, this new Antonio Pierce-led Raiders team, it's not going to be one that just chucks the ball 50 times, so the volume's not going to be there. The accuracy isn't quite there yet, so just pass. Is Michael Mayer somewhere, anywhere on the radar?
Not really. I mean, touchdown or bust, and really, are you banking on a touchdown? Not starting him.
Nah, not enough upside. Matchup's not terrible, but the offense isn't good enough. Seahawks taking on the 49ers. Let's talk Geno Smith. The last time we saw him, he was pulling out his best game of the season kind of out of nowhere, and that was against a really good Cowboys defense. Is it possible he does it again against the Niners?
On the road against San Francisco. Like, do we think San Francisco is going to come off that game last week and overlook their division rival, Seattle Seahawks? I don't think so. Look, you want to chase last week's game, you do you. Barely in 2 QB Superflex.
Like, one thing we talked about is maybe the Cowboys were caught looking ahead because this week they have to play the Eagles. So Seahawks, you know what? Props to them for showing up, but yeah, I'm not going to trust Geno Smith on the road against this Niners defense. Not Brock Purdy, on the other hand. I mean, he's just rolling. Is he a guy now who's just a QB1 for fantasy?
Yeah, and especially this week at home against the Seahawks, you should have no worries. Start Brock Purdy.
Yep. Even though he doesn't bring that rushing upside, it doesn't matter. CMC, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, Purdy is pretty much the highest floor QB other than these no doubt must starts out there. So if you got him, start him. The Bills going to take on the Chiefs. Should be a very interesting game here. Josh Allen, good. Dalton Kincaid, is he also a must start?
Yeah, I feel like if you got Kincaid, he's one of these tight ends. He's been mostly good. You just start him and you take what you get.
Yeah, for the most part, Kincaid owners should just not even think about it. You got him, you can roll him out there. Broncos taking on the Chargers. Russell Wilson had been looking better. The Broncos were winning. And then last week took a little step back. Does he bounce back against this Chargers defense?
Yeah, it's a great matchup. Chargers defense not very good. And what I really like for Russ is he's running more. He ran in a touchdown last week. He doesn't have a tremendous ceiling because he's not going to throw for 300 yards. He's probably not going to throw for multiple touchdowns. But in this matchup, I think you can start Russ even in a 1 QB league.
Going to agree. And even though there's not a lot of QBs on bye, if you do need a quarterback, if you've just been streaming the position, I kind of like Russ this week, even better than last week. So I'm not going to go crazy and say that he's going to be a stud or boom or anything, but I think he's a strong possibility. Justin Herbert, can't say set and forget anymore because those big numbers haven't been there lately. Is it there this week against the Broncos defense, which has been better?
Yeah, it has been better, but he is at home. You got to think this offense, I mean, this is like now or never. This offense has to get rolling in a good matchup at home against the Broncos. I think for the most part, Justin Herbert, still a good start this week.
Yeah, on paper, this isn't like a smash spot or anything. Maybe it's the name or being too stubborn for whatever it is. I don't know. I have Herbert in a ton of leagues. I'm just not benching him. I'm keeping him in my lineup and just take what I get. And then Gerald Everett at tight end seems to be the beneficiary of all these injuries at wide receiver for the Chargers. Is he a guy that you would start in week 14?
I mean, he's not the worst start. Denver's a great matchup. We know he can at least score, which is more than we can say for a lot of these tight ends we've talked about. So I think he's a decent streaming option this week.
Definitely a decent option. Like you said, that Denver defense has been terrible against tight ends for the most part. So don't go crazy. Don't force them over your regular tight end. But if your options are thin, Everett might be one of the best streamers. Next up, the Eagles at the Cowboys. You definitely want either of the quarterbacks in this matchup, but let's talk tight end. Dallas Goedert hasn't played for a couple of weeks. If this is the week he returns, would you start him?
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably would. Like, it sounded like he was close last week. He practiced. If he practices fully all week and is good to go, I mean, there's not a lot of tight ends I'm putting over Dallas Goedert. So if he plays, I'm probably starting him.
Yeah, I mean, this really might come down to the wire here, deciding if he's good, how much is he going to play, how could you feel about him, who else you got. So it really depends, but Goddard is still one of the better tight end options out there. And then Jake Ferguson, also looking like a great option. He had a nice game against Philly the last time. Do you think he does it again?
Yeah, why not? If Philly's not a good defense against tight ends, the Cowboys are at home. You got Jake Ferguson, just put him in your lineup, take what you get.
The last few weeks, Philly hasn't been really a good defense against anybody. So, yeah, if I have Jake Ferguson, I'm just starting him. Then we got the Titans taking on the Dolphins on Monday night, the first of 2 Monday nighters. Will Levis, can he have himself a game here?
No, I mean, that first game where he threw 4 touchdowns feels like it didn't even happen this year. I mean, on the road against the Dolphins, no thank you.
Yeah, it's not going to happen this year. Look, I don't mind Levis as a prospect, but in fantasy in 2023, it's just no. What about Chig Okonkwo?
He's kind of been getting involved the last couple of games. But, I mean, on the road against Miami, do I really want to start him? Probably not.
Week 14, I need more upside. If you're looking to win, you got to have a player who you feel like can at least score a touchdown, make some big plays. So, yeah, Conco doesn't do it for me. Then also on Monday night, the Packers and the Giants. Let's talk Jordan Love. He has been rolling lately. You got to think he can keep it going here against this defense.
Yeah, definitely. Against the Giants, the way he's been playing, even in a 1 QB league, I think Jordan Love is a good start.
Might be a great start this week. I mean, I don't know if he'll have to pass it as much, but still, he's been efficient, not turning it over, getting touchdowns. I like Jordan Love a lot this week. At tight end, it's still Tucker Kraft because Luke Musgrave is out for the season. Does Kraft intrigue you because of this matchup?
I mean, a little bit. He kind of gets involved. He could score, which again is more than we could say for a lot of these tight ends, but I can only say he's a streaming option.
Yeah, he still feels a little bit like touchdown or bust to me because he's not getting many targets. So, maybe if Christian Watson is out and it's a non-PPR or a half PPR league, but other than that, I need more upside. And then at quarterback, we could see another Tommy DeVito week coming off another actually strong game before the bye. Can you consider him?
Against this Packers defense, Packers team, I mean, yeah, they're not like an incredible defense, but they're good enough. Barely in 2 QB superflex.
Yeah, let's not go crazy. I mean, Tommy DeVito is their best option, but still, only superflex. All right, we got you covered with all the advice you need to help win in fantasy. Check out our Week 14 playlist with start-sit advice for every position.